Welcome to the HyperPod. Today we have Sunny, aka Monk, with us on the pod. Happy to have you.
Happy to be here, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, feeling bullish with hyperprogeny all-time highs.
100%. I think I was always convicted. I was telling myself, because of mistakes I've made in past cycles, I'm like, all right, like this is the one thing I'll hold on a longer time frame, and the one project that I believe can outlast and stand the test of time. But at $9, it was feeling pretty hard. It
was tough. It was tough, bro. I was thinking, I was like, no, did I round trip? Did I really round trip this again? And those questions come into your mind, and you start to see stuff like, the jelly incident, and you're like, damn, like this is not good. And I know.
Yeah, because crypto constantly punishes you for being too much of a believer. I'm like, oh, did I just believe too hard again? And now I feel a little bit more vindicated.
Definitely,
you got to believe in something.
You got to believe in something, and I think, like Jeff said, if you see 100x, you got to drop what you're doing and pretty much go in, right?
Yeah.
So tell us, what's your story? You were one of the very early, I think, public analysts to actually write a proper valuation framework around Hyperliquid, the perp dex, Hyper EVM, and I think it got a lot of attraction, and that's, I think, where most people know you from. But tell us more about your story and how you actually first found Hyperliquid, and walk us through how you started from that standpoint and to where you are now.
Yeah. So just as some context. So before I worked at Messari, I was working at a long only hedge fund, equities fund. It was pretty small, but that was my career. I was very involved in the public markets, and at the time there were there still is. There's very restrictive compliance requirements to working at a hedge fund, and I basically couldn't really invest in stocks. I could buy ETFs and whatnot, but picking individual names was very, very hard, and trading was on a shorter term basis was even more so. And so I was talking with some of my friends who were in the industry, and this was around 2021 or so. They were like, hey, you should look at crypto. And I asked my PM, I'm like, is this stuff okay? And he was like, yeah, there's no current guidelines to how you should be reporting this. And so I kind of jumped right into it. I know some people found the start of their crypto journey with Bitcoin or Ethereum, but for me it was straight middle of the Ponzi NFT speculative hype cycle season, and I made a lot of money and I lost a lot of money, but it was the most fun I've had in the markets ever. And at the same time, I knew that there was something happening here. There's something really cool underpinning all this degenerate stuff that I was doing from a tech and societal standpoint. And so really just became a crypto maxi from there, and actually thought about moving into the industry immediately. But 2022 kind of came around, post FTX. It was kind of a hard time to be a crypto maxi. It was my first real bear market. Yeah. And so throughout that period,
all your colleagues were probably saying, I told you so.
Yeah, no, I thought I was stupid. I was like, okay, I completely fucked this up. Everyone was right. I'm an idiot. But then from an industry standpoint, I started to see things turn around. BTC bounced back so fast. You got the asset managers on board in the US with the ETFs, which now the incentives are aligned with the largest institutions of the world. We started to see early narratives start to form with pro crypto talk in DC, and the ETFs went live. Bitcoin made a new high, and so all of these tailwinds were starting to emerge. And I'm like, okay, I can't hold this off any longer. If I'm going to make a career choice, I'd rather be in a growing industry that could die than a stagnant one. that's pretty established. And so Messari had a job opportunity open. I had always respected the research that they put out. I was a huge fan of some of their like early analysts, like Watkins and whatnot. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to make the jump. And actually, like at the time, I had already started to use Hyperliquid a bit, both like on the perp side and also on like the HLP side. This was like the middle of 2024. And I wanted to write about it immediately as my first report. And so like for one of the like the application questions they were asking, like what's a protocol that you think is undervalued or is not consensus that you really, really like? And I was like Hyperliquid. But just because of like logistics, I wasn't able to write about it immediately, but wrote about it with my second report. And from there, it was like, I was like, this is the most important thing I can think of right now in crypto that no one else is talking about. And so I think I put out like 4 Hyperliquid reports already. And so really like kind of like in Messari, I'm the Hyperliquid guy. So like that's been kind of my thing now. I mean, obviously I cover other stuff too, but Hyperliquid has been like what I think is the most important thing for me to cover right now.
No, amazing. I think, that research has been super valuable. There's a lot of people outside of Hyperliquid that are still skeptical. And, I think it takes research firms like Messari to put out a clear like synthesis to get, some eyes to actually properly look into the ecosystem beyond just people on Twitter commenting Hyperliquid in every tweet. So yeah, hats off to you guys. So I think like following on that, if you think back to the first report that you wrote, I don't recall which one it was specifically, but looking at Hyperliquid now and looking at what you wrote back then, what actually played out and what is still yet to play out in the reports that you wrote? Yeah,
so like the first report, which is not the valuation report. The valuation report was the second report. The first report was basically just like, I think it was like, I was one of the earlier people. I'm not the first, but like the on-chain Binance thing was kind of flirting around at that point of like how to describe Hyperliquid. Because I think like there was a narrative problem with Hyperliquid because everyone that was outside of the Hyperliquid community just kind of thought this was like another run-of-the-mill like perps dex, like DYDX / like GMX type of project. And I'm like, wait, like there's something completely different about this project. And even at that time, like the Arbitrum, like L3 stuff was like way more prevalent than it is now. And so I'm like, okay, people don't even know that this is not like an actual like Arbitrum project. Like, so we're so far off from where like Hyperliquid should be characterized that I need to write a report about this. And so that was when I started like referencing the on-chain Binance thing. And like, I think it's played out quite well. And when I look at that report and even the valuation report, honestly, like the actual stuff that the team has been able to build, like has exceeded like what I initially talked about. And so essentially the important things were that, look, this isn't like just a perp dex. It's an on-chain club that's built on a highly performant L1, which could be used for other applications in the future. It has a native spot market. These are all things that are like primitives in DeFi that we haven't seen before. And since then, I think it's become like very clear that those things ended up being more valuable to the story than people were giving it credit for. And it wasn't me. Like I sourced a lot from the community itself. I'm consistently amazed by like how much good research the community puts out. The team does almost none of it. Like it's almost all people that are just putting out like independent works. But yeah, like at the time, the report was just like, hey, let's reframe the narrative. Like this is not just like a perp dex application. This is a novel perp dex constructed in a completely new way on a performant L1 that could be used for other applications. Yeah, no, it's incredibly bullish.
Like let's chat a bit about, Hyperliquid as the asset tokenization layer, right? We've seen, Unit Protocol, right, being sort of closely aligned with the Hyperliquid team, and they've been sort of given the mandate of bringing these various spot tokens to the chain. We just saw today Solana and Fartcoin perfect barbell portfolio asset, being enabled as native deposits onto Hyperliquid, and then obviously by extension, those assets can now be used in Hyper EVM. What do you think the market is not valuing about Hyperliquid and that specific aspect of being able to suck in liquidity from any major crypto asset and basically enable its utility in a DeFi ecosystem where users actually want to use stuff? Like launching an application on Hyper EVM is actually nice because people use the product because they're interested, not just for the incentives, which is not very common in the industry, as you know.
Yeah, I think what Unit's doing, I think like HIP3, and I think the spot market is the most undervalued aspect of Hyperliquid's narrative today. Like everyone knows the perp dex is great. I think there are some doubts about Hyper EVM. I'm obviously pretty bullish about like what can eventually arise out of the EVM, but like deservedly so. Like it's a newer ecosystem. I mean, the metrics are great, they're growing, but like I understand if people want to associate like a higher risk premium with how the Hyper EVM turns out. But like the spot market, I think is being completely discounted, and just like the amount of things that you can do with units, like indexing structure and how they can tokenize things like outside of crypto. And so just to like put into perspective, like from an on-chain perspective, right? Like historically, spot trading has been facilitated, like still is, like mostly through less performant AMMs because blockchains were less performant. And so we had to rely on AMMs because these were the only things that really worked. Like you couldn't really build an order book on Ethereum in 2021, even 2022, 2023. Like you can't build on it now. It's just too slow. It's too expensive. Like you won't get any market makers interested in making a club on like on Ethereum, or even I think like most L2s and Solana. It's just not that feasible. And so people think AMMs are how like spot transactions should be done because they have been done through AMMs. But I think it's very clear that like if you look at Binance and what they're doing, like they found incredible PMF with facilitating spot transactions through an order book. Yeah. And it just hasn't been done before because it was literally not possible. And now on Hyperliquid, it's possible. Like you can route spot transactions through this like highly performant, highly liquid order book. And the slippage on like buying like $2 million of BTC in one transaction on Hyperliquid is nothing like we've ever seen before on chain. And so I think the long tail stuff, and you've seen it with like the like native spot tokens, like some of the memes like that are listed on the spot market today. Like it doesn't work great when you're just relying on like HIP2 and there's no like external market makers. I think for long tail assets, you can make the case AMMs like are always going to be around for that specific type of use case. But for majors, like there's like a huge opportunity for Hyperliquid to just vamp like BTC ETH SOL trading volume, because there's no way these AMMs are going to be able to compete with a performant on-chain club. So that's like the on-chain layer. I think the off-chain opportunity is you can eventually start to launch things like PaxG. You can launch things like maybe like tokenized equity products that we haven't seen like really take off on chain. But with Hyperliquid's like user cohort, with the amount of degens on Hyperliquid, like if it becomes this like do it all, trade it all, like on chain financial platform, maybe it gets more interest now than it ever has before, like with it being on Hyperliquid. So I'm really curious to see where that goes. Like I know the unit team, both the unit team and like the Hyperliquid core team have been like teasing this idea of launching like equities and RWAs on the spot market. But I think that's a massive opportunity. And if you want to compare it to like off-chain sexes or like even off-chain like brokerages like Robinhood, like there's no KYC, it's permissionless to use. It's composable within a broader DeFi platform. It's not like a siloed product. And so there are all these advantages that I think, one, like the low hanging fruit is you just vamp like a ton of volumes for like BTC particularly like on chain, from like AMMs, less performant AMMs, into like eventually becoming like a better trading platform. And this is like longer term, but becoming a better trading platform than like anything that's ever existed.
Yeah, 100%. And do you think Unit Protocol will sort of build out some type of clear loop product, right? So, we've seen this popularity. A lot of funds and like custodians will basically offer this to their clients to hedge the risk that, right, let's say Binance or OKX or whatever goes down. I've sort of seen murmuring that, hey, people are scared something happens to Hyperliquid. Is there a way, or should there be a way to basically trade via a clear loop product, on Hyperliquid spot, or something similar, right? So in this scenario, right, someone would be able to hold their assets in a custodian like BitGo or, Copper or whatever you want. And then you can mint that sort of receipt tradable token on Unit. So like in practice, it would work like you deposit native Bitcoin to, your generated asset on Hyperliquid, right, via Unit. That BTC gets swept into a custodian account, right, which is still on the Bitcoin chain. It's just housed in custody via this third-party custodian, and then Unit can still enable the trading of that U asset on Hyperliquid. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the custodial risk and like the counterparty risk is like one thing that continues to plague larger players that I've spoken to about Hyperliquid, and like they're pretty uncomfortable with holding a large portion of their book on Hyperliquid. And I think the good thing about Unit's like indexing layer, the way that it works with the indexers, which, I'm not going to say I'm like the most familiar with, but it sounds like very, very flexible, and they're going to grow that layer over time. And I think you can apply all types of creative solutions to get around like custodying your assets directly, and relying on like this one protocol. Like I think you can offload that eventually. And I'm sure that'll be like the next step for both like Unit and the Hyperliquid team, is to figure out how to dispel some of these like valid concerns around how secure Hyperliquid is as a custodian. Because I think for the larger players, it will matter 100%. So I would like to see them do that, but I haven't looked into how viable the solutions are at all.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And what's your thoughts around new collateral assets or margin assets on Hyperliquid? So, for example, you can deposit native Bitcoin and use that as margin, to trade on Hyperliquid. What's your thoughts on the opportunity there?
Yeah, I think that's the holy grail, right? It just makes everything more capital efficient. I think it drives home the use cases even further. But just from what I've heard talking to builders, and I'm not the most well versed on this, but it seems like a harder unlock than people tend to think than I thought. Like I thought it was going to be. I didn't think it would be that hard, but I think like just creating some sort of on-chain way to enable the spot collateral as like, let's say perps collateral, or like a spot, like something on the spot market, or the spot order book as like collateral for the perps book. It seems like there's some nuances there that are hard to figure out, or else I feel like they would have done it already. And so,
I think you need a liquid spot book, right? So, like how are you going to liquidate that collateral to cover, right, the perps position? You need like a super liquid BTC spot book. And that's like partly why Binance has that dominance, because like spot BTC trading is super liquid on Binance, and consequently, you're right, you can use BTC as margin there, and then it makes sense, right? But if you don't have that, my understanding is you can't have that asset as margin.
Yeah, I mean, Binance is probably the source for price discovery on like most large cap assets in crypto. Like Hyperliquid's not even close yet in terms of even even on purpose, but specifically for spot, I think there's a lot of room to grow there. And I think that they will do it. But yeah, I think that's going to be a harder solve than maybe people are expecting. But it is like, I think, one of the holy grails for like what product should have if you're building in this space. So I'd love to see them do it.
Yeah, 100%. So, we touched on the Hyper EVM, and, some people think like there's not much going on there. Meanwhile, I think we're about to cross $1 billion in TVL with zero incentives and sort of a builder economy that I personally have never seen before. It's like a level of hunger and drive and sort of passion that I'd equate to, Solana at like $8 or $9 after the big run up, and then, the major crash. And then there was this group of believers that were completely determined to revive this thing. And so it's not that Hyperliquid has crashed or anything. It's more that you have these people that obviously, made life-changing money from the airdrop, and they didn't choose. Obviously, some people chose to sell, but others chose to use that as funding to actually build something great in the ecosystem. Do you think the market undervalues that? Because you have these massive grant programs on every other L1, but here you have people building with true conviction. And do you think that creates a Lindy effect that outpaces the growth of any other L1 in the market at the moment?
I think some of the criticisms are valid in that like it's not the most performant like EVM chain. But that can be fixed over time. It's not like a priority right now, I think, for the Hyperliquid team to scale the performance of the Hyper EVM. I think that'll happen eventually. And I think you don't even need it to be that scaled. Like just pre-confs and the potential like ability to interact with the order book is such a big value proposition that it will matter as a chain. But I think like what you're touching on here is like, I don't think there are that many real communities left in crypto. Like I remember a lot in like 2021 that were like, a lot of them were decimated, but there were like real communities that put like serious amounts of money into an ecosystem and like truly believe. And I don't know, like maybe the Solana manlets are like comparable, but like I don't really think there's any like cohort of users and builders that are as convicted on like Hyperliquid and as tied to Hyperliquid as any other protocol community that I've seen so far this cycle. So like I think that's being massively discounted, and that's why like I mean the team has the war chest to deploy like some sort of like a rewards and incentives program right now to like the Hyper EVM, but they haven't, and it's still growing so fast. And from like a market perspective, I think it was like completely taken out of the Hyperliquid valuation, like on that drop down to $9, because like Jeff and the team launched that with like I was laughing because like it's so on brand for them. They just like launched it with no marketing, like it was like it caught everyone by surprise.
I know. I actually made, so I was like making educational content, like I always do. And I had to like make a tutorial on this weird way to move the asset from Hypercore to Hyper EVM. And you had to send it to this like, the super long, like 0.000055555 address. And then, obviously none of the wallets supported it. And it was just like the most like random way to get a user to do something, but they still did it. And that was my point, right? Like people followed the tutorial and they were hungry, right? And they were looking, they were searching, and they just wanted to do stuff. And, it proved the point, right? You started to see stuff on Twitter. What a bad launch. Like the EVM's not going to go anywhere. But again, like there was this residual like user base and builder base, and $1 billion later, like here we are, zero incentives. And
Yeah, but I think that actually ended up working in like hype the asset's favor, because there was like even the builders had no idea this was going to happen. And so it launched with like zero features, zero dApps, like nothing was there. And so everyone was like, oh, this is like a garbage chain. Like no one's going to use this. But then like slowly, like you just start to see that kind of form, which I like. If you were paying attention, like I don't think people really like. Obviously, the Hyperliquid community is very loud for me on Twitter, but for a lot of people, I don't think it is. And so we always knew that there were going to be like all these teams that were going to build on the Hyper EVM, but people kind of did not know that and just looked at the EVM for what it was at launch. And I think that that you basically at this point get like a free call option on the EVM. Like if it plays out like it has, like if these trends continue, if this growth trajectory continues, and you get what, like a top like 7-6 chain by like TVL and by like other activity metrics, and then all of a sudden people are looking at it again like a core part of Hyperliquid story. So I do think that, and I don't think pre-comps are out yet, right? Like I think reads are, but I don't think you can actually directly execute a transaction on the order book yet, right?
Yeah, you can't. So yeah, we're just waiting for the right compiles to go live.
Yeah, I mean when that's out, like then you're gonna start seeing the applications that can take advantage of being in such close proximity to Hypercore. Whereas right now, I think it's a lot of like necessary DeFi servicing, like restaking, like lending, like depositing BTC into places where you can earn a little bit more on it. Like I think that's all very much needed, but I think the real potent and like powerful stuff probably hasn't even come yet.
Yeah, 100%. So like touching on that, I mean, what are you excited about that is yet to be built on Hyper EVM? Like, do you think we're going to see a major breakthrough dApp that, like everyone gets familiar with because of these new capabilities, or how do you think it's going to play out?
I'm going to spend some time in the future. I think I'm going to write a standalone report on the Hyper EVM and just see what else is out there and like what people can really build. I think I have like a lot of the like surface level stuff of how like what the possibilities are. But I do want to see if anyone's like tangibly trying to take advantage of the features and build something novel. I think for now though, the Hyperliquid like community has really taken to these like Hyperliquid native teams that are building like native Hyperliquid protocols like Felix and all these specifically branded protocols. I'm not worried, but like I'm excited for the potential of larger players eventually moving over to the Hyper EVM, like your Morphos, your Aves, your like, I know Tether's already.
Like Morpho, Morpho announced the deployment of their sort of light implementation, which basically means they, deploy the smart contracts and other teams can build their own front end. So for example, that's what Hyperbeat's doing. So we are actually hosting the front end for Morpho, and basically you'll be able to leverage up against unit assets and basically any other asset that you want. And once Pendle comes onto the chain, you'll be able to do PT looping like you've never been able to do before. And you have like Hyperlend, which is sort of a designated Aave v2 fork. So, like Aave and Morpho and Co, they are like taking part on the chain indirectly. Like whether they will come themselves, I mean, probably. Like if Hyperliquid becomes what we think it will, yes. But I do think the community sort of values these native protocols that are building this out because there's upside there. And, there's not actually that many teams that are bootstrapped, that are self-funded. A lot of the Hyper EVM teams actually raised, some didn't. And I think the market will figure that out over time. And if those that didn't raise are able to execute at the level that those that did, I mean, right, bullish.
It's funny because during the initial stage of like the Hyper EVM, as like part of the job at Messari, like you liaison sometimes with VCs who are clients of ours, they're readers of ours. And I remember getting some like pretty like high tier VCs reach out and going, hey, can you connect us with any teams in the Hyper EVM? And I was like, yeah, but I don't think they'll be interested. Like, I think,
yeah.
And no, I don't think anyone was interested because like they were just all like either like they had raised money from like Hyperliquid community members / like whales, or they just self-funded it with the money they made from the Hyperliquid airdrop. And so I think it's like the whole community is just so homegrown, and you just like so hard to find.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we did at HyperBeat. So, I mean, we haven't raised, and we've literally just been building off of our own airdrops, which is, I think, how it should be, right? And, it almost feels wrong, right? Not that there's nothing wrong with raising, but it's more, the way in which that's done, and, if it's done in a fair and I think equitable way for people.
I mean, what has the experience been like for you building on the EVM?
Yeah, so for us, it's been great, honestly. Like it's competitive, it's collaborative, right? People are sort of growing the pie, right? So, yes, all of us as teams indirectly, right? Well, directly compete, but indirectly we help each other because we know the more value we can create, the bigger the pie will be for all of us, right? So, with HyperEVM crossing like $1 billion in TVL, I'd say like 1/3 of that is like tied up in the spot market. And, it's not like true 1 billion TVL across HyperEVM protocols, but all of us are growing really quickly. And like the user base is incredible. I think another aspect that people don't talk about enough is the fact that Hyperliquid has a lot of traders, and not all traders are DeFi people, right? Some traders are like just traders, and they've never really touched the DeFi side. And these guys have a brain, so they know how like the markets work, but at the same time they've got capital. So what we've noticed is, when you build products for these type of people, you start to see them sort of trickle in and gain interest, and you see pretty chunky deposits, but you don't see any other activity from this wallet. And you go and check their wallet and see, okay, they've got all these perp positions open, but they just did one deposit into our vault. So what does that tell you, right? It tells you that there is a user base here that nobody else has really tapped into. And I think that this relationship between HyperEVM and Hypercore bridges that gap for power traders to become power DeFi users. And just in general, like the rest of the HyperEVM sort of community, people are so hungry that, you can launch we launched the protocol, 0 insiders, like 0 sort of early TVL deals, like none of that. Like just launch the product and they will come. And it's exactly what happened. And we hit $60 million in TVL in like 2 or 3 months. So like I know for a fact that's not really possible on other chains. It's not possible because there's not this community, and it's sort of infested with like insiders in some way, shape, or form. So it's a stark difference for me, like building here, and at the same time, it's the same experience for everyone else. Like you can literally build a product, and just because it's a good product, it will grow. You don't need to be cutting inside deals to try and get TVL. Like the TVL will come by itself.
Yeah, so it's such a hard thing to do in crypto, to find like real users, that I think this is like that alone is enough for me to believe in the Hyper EVM. There's just so few real users, and like users that are not extractive. And if you look at the type of like power user on Hyperliquid, which is like the degenerate trader, like they're interacting with the product so many times a day. And obviously they're going to be interested in how they can make more money on the platform where they keep like pretty much all of their funds. And so it's like the addressable market is already there for the Hyper EVM.
Exactly. And, there's so many things to trade. Like crypto is a market for trading volatility. And there's just so much more upside, I think. And, I can't, like, bag bias aside, it's legitimately, I think, the best place to release a product and try and attract users. So it's exciting.
Agreed.
Yeah. So typically we like to end off our pods with some speculation around price predictions. So just disclaimer, not financial advice from one of the leading analysts in the Hyperliquid ecosystem, guys. But how are you seeing like high price action play out, through the end of 2025, and then also over the next 3 years, right? Because the Lindy effect is only going to grow. Do you think Solana can compete with, Hyperliquid can compete with Solana and Ethereum like in the next 3 to 5 years? Like give us some thoughts and some moon predictions. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Again, just to reiterate, not financial advice, but I think when I first dropped my initial valuation report, like on Avo and like the pre-market sites, I think the market was like pricing it at like 2 to 4 billion, and I remember going, that's just way too low. Like that should almost be like the max bear case, like for me. And so I thought at the time that the fair value based off of like what existed out there in crypto and the amount of liquidity in the environment at that time was like anywhere between 13 to 30 billion, which is exactly like almost where it's been ranging. And then this is like FTV, but like for me, if you look at everything that's happening on a fundamental basis with Hyperliquid, like the growth trajectory, the fact that it's already like top 2, if like top 3, if not like top 2 or top 1 in daily fees, like by app and by chain, like on a daily basis now. And the fact that I think it's so under-owned. There are so many, I'm not going to say, there's so many tokens out there that are vaporware that have like larger distributed ownership than Hype. And a lot of that is because of, one, just like the amount of FUD that tends to circulate this project for some reason. And 2, like the fact that a lot of people are forcibly sidelined because they, like, whether they're funds or whatever, they haven't figured out a way to buy in a compliant manner, which I think they will eventually. They'll just have to get it done. And so you have something that's today, I think, should be on a relative basis, a top 15, top 10 protocol. It's under-owned. The growth trajectory, in my opinion, is not going to slow down anytime soon. It's already like 70 to 80% of perp dex share. Like now throw in the amount of share it can take in the spot market for like majors, and then throw in like Hyper EVM moving up the rankings in TVL, like across all blockchains, all general purpose blockchains. And I look at some of this stuff up here in like the top 15. I'm not going to name names, but like there's some, there's some stuff that it just baffles me that they're like ahead of Hyperliquid on like either like a circulating or like a FTV basis. And the tokenomics are still so good, right? So maybe I'll end with this because this is going to be like a part of my next report. And so there's like I think the best midterm bear case you can make for Hype and Hyperliquid is that they kind of filled this vacuum of there not being a really good product for perps at the time that they had launched. Like DYDX incentives were ending. They came in with a much superior product. They shipped way faster. And you can make the argument that like going from like 0% of Binance's share to like 10% or like 15% of Binance's share, like a lot of that was just low hanging fruit of like all of this retail flow on chain that wanted to move somewhere and trade actively. And they just created the best product for them. And that it's going to get much harder from here because they'll actually have to start stealing users, either normal takers or like HFT, sophisticated, like more informed flow from Binance and like moving that onto Hyperliquid. And that there are all these competitors, right, that are launching on other chains that are like more optimized, more performant, lower latency from the jump to appeal to that type of flow. And that maybe Hyperliquid is really good at taking retail flow, but it won't be as good at capturing like sophisticated like HFT flow. Like, I think just being able to replicate, like those people are not going to move over unless there's some level of baseline like retail activity, or else there's just not enough in it for them. And so stealing that away from Hyperliquid is going to be incredibly difficult from here on out. And the way that the team has weaponized a token, I mean, there's still like more. I think there's like more tokens left to allocate to like community incentives than there are.
Yeah,
that there were in the first airdrop.
Yeah, 38.9% plus the assistant fund. It's a lot.
Yeah, so you have that like in the back burner of like they can always fend off like aggressive competitors with more tokens than those competitors could ever plan to bootstrap. And so, yeah, I think it's just set up to be one of like maybe 5 secular multi-cycle winners in the space, an eventual top 10 token. But to answer your question, I think it should be like top 10 by the end of the year. And I'm not going to make a market cap call because I think that liquidity conditions in crypto can always change and everything is relative. And so it might be in the top 10, but maybe that's because every other token nukes harder than Hyperliquid does. So I'm not going to give a directional market cap call. I'm just looking at the rankings and saying like, until this thing is like there with the Solanas at some point, I'm not going to be like I'm not going to give up on the token. That's just my view.
There we go, guys. Yeah, don't sell your hype. Hold it, leverage it safely.
Loop it,
please.
Yeah,
loop it. Just use it, but don't lose it. So that's the pod today. Thanks, Sunny, for joining us. I think this has been a great one, and it's been a pleasure chatting to you today.
Thank you for having me. Maybe we can do a round 2 at some point.
For sure. Once we top 10, we can reflect on this and be like, we made it, boys. Alrighty.
All right.
Thanks, hey. Cheers.